The holidays are all about sharing with family. Meals, couches, stories, Grandma's secret pecan pie recipe. And now you can also share a cart with Instacart Family Carts. Everyone can add what they want to one group cart from wherever they are. So you don't have to go from room to room to find out who wants cranberry sauce, or whether you should get mini marshmallows for the yams, or collecting votes for sugar cookies versus shortbread. Just share a cart, and then share the meals and the moments. Download the Instacart app and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy free delivery on your first 3 orders. Service fees and terms apply.
Well, just first of all, you've been covering this all along in Scotland. So what are your, before we get to today's ruling, what have your general impressions been over the past, 8-9 months of these interactions with Arthur Knight, Nicholas Rossi, and what it's been like there?
I've been court reporting in Scotland for over 20 years, and I really thought by this point that I had seen it all. I really thought I'd covered every court story there was until this one. Everything about it was just unusual right from the start. And that was really down to the man himself. It's very unusual in Scotland for the person who is the suspect or the accused person to interact with the media almost right from the first hearing and want to give interviews. And that was very unusual in this regard. And he, from that very first hearing, he was, after the hearing, in a wheelchair, in an oxygen mask, wearing a hat. He waited behind for the media to come out and then spoke to us. And that, I think, then really set the tone for the next couple of months for the media here, in that he, from the very start, was wanting to tell his story and get his version of events across. But after, I would say, a couple of months, maybe even a couple of weeks, the media here very quickly, the media here realised that there wasn't a great deal of truth to what he was telling us.
Yeah, what was the impression over there? I mean, did people just not believe the story he was telling and that he really was this person from America?
Right at the start, everybody said, this is not true. He's not telling the truth. I think people could see through the mask very quickly. It didn't help that the accent he was putting on oscillated, and he even said that in court this week, from posh English to North Dublin. And that almost was a tell for a lot of people straight away that this wasn't somebody who was telling the truth.
So just now to this week, so the beginning of this week, there was a hearing. What was that like? I think the big thing that made the news was that he claimed he got tattoos while he was in a coma, or that he woke up from a coma and got tattoos.
So essentially the courtroom is packed. The courtroom is packed in Edinburgh. It's full of journalists. There was some there from America. There's documentary makers there. There's podcast makers there, as well as the Scottish media who have been following this every hearing practically for every month. There's been a different aspect to this case. So it's been sort of the usual faces you see when you go to court. After the prosecution witnesses, we were expecting his wife, Miranda, to give her evidence. But his lawyer stood up and said, I just want to have a word with my client, and went over and whispered to Rossi, or Mr. Knight, as he was calling himself then, and said, well, it's up to you. It's up to you. You really have to, it's really you. And then within seconds later, he says, yes, I want to do it. And he said, my client's going to give evidence. And he was in a wheelchair sitting right beside his defence lawyers. And he wheeled himself over to give evidence, took off a face mask that he was wearing, and started to tell this story. The lawyers were, this came through questioning by the prosecution, the advocate depute, when they asked to explain the tattoos. And his version of events was that he was in a coma for 18 days in the hospital. Before he went into the coma, before he went into hospital, he said he had no marks, no tattoos on his body. And he woke up from the coma 18 days later with tattoos on his arms. That was his version of events. And today the sheriff said that account was implausible and fantastical. The nurses and doctors and the police officers who gave evidence earlier that week said that they had identified tattoos that were included in the images on the Interpol Red Notice. They had seen them while treating him as a patient in the hospital. The doctor had said at the time, the man they knew as Arthur Knight was one of the sickest patients in ICU. So that involved a lot of care. So they were, over his body, attending to him, saving his life. And that's when they noticed these tattoos.
So today's ruling then in the court that they found that Arthur Knight is Nicholas Rossi is not really a surprise to anybody.
The decision today from the sheriff came as very little surprise. There was no reaction from him when it was announced. I think from looking at him, it was almost as if he had accepted the inevitable. He just stared straight ahead. He became more animated afterwards when his lawyer was discussing the possibility of bail. The next hearing is now proceeding to a full extradition hearing is in January, and that's a preliminary hearing, and the full hearing will be in March. So that means he will now remain in custody over Christmas and New Year, and there was quite a lot of discussion about whether or not he would be granted bail. The sheriff said no, he poses a significant flight risk.
Yeah. So again, this is just one step in the process. It continues out for a few more months, but I think this is kind of, that aha moment. Like he's been telling this story now for close to a year that he's not who everybody says he is. So how big of a deal is this where you are in Scotland that this has now happened?
It is making headline news. Here in STV, we played a half-hour documentary. We were out in Rhode Island filming with you guys and filming in Rhode Island and speaking to a lot of people. And there was a lot of interest in that last night, which was the night before this decision. And I've been speaking to a lot of people today who are really telling me, well, this confirms what we already knew. It's making headline news here today in Scotland. It will be in the front pages of every newspaper in Scotland tonight and tomorrow.